Hey all, it's Starzy and today we are talking spooky movies. I think we all know by now that big fan of spooky stuff here. Horror is my favourite movie genre and I do get pretty into Halloween, and so for the second year in a row I decided to only watch spooky movies in October. And on top of that, I made the goal that I wanted to watch a spooky movie for every day of the month. So here we are, having successfully watched 31 spooky movies in October 2020. Second year in a row I've done this. And so just as I did last time, I'm going to be going through them all today in order of what I ranked the lowest to the highest. A few things, I guess, before I get into that. First of all, obviously this is all very much personal opinion. I tend to rate things just on personal enjoyment, so, you know, it's what I personally enjoyed. It's not necessarily always, like, based on kind of more objective quality as much as, not that any review can be truly objective, but, you know. And the other thing to note is, particularly this year, I feel like, don't take this list exactly as what I would put above and below each other, just from the perspective of most of the things I watched that I rated a certain thing, I feel like I felt very similar about them. Like if I rated, you know, a handful of movies 4 stars, I couldn't necessarily tell you which one I think was I would put above or below each of them. It's more just I kind of felt very similarly about them all, and so outside of the star ratings there isn't really an order to how the movies are listed beyond that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything you need to know before we get into all the movies, because there's a lot to get through today, obviously. Yeah, 31 spooky movies. Most of them, I think, were horror movies, but there are also some lighter things in there that just had, like, the vibes that I felt were appropriate for October, you know? Now, I'm actually going to start with a handful of movies that I didn't rate at all, for various reasons, so we'll do those first. So there's 4 movies that I didn't give a rating to. First of all, The Invisible Man, which is a 2020 horror movie release, so new movie. I think it's taking an old concept but doing it, you know, completely new movie, where a woman has an abusive husband and everyone thinks he's died, but, you know, the Invisible Man. The thing about this movie is that I didn't enjoy it, but it was very much like, I personally didn't enjoy it, but I don't think it was badly done. Like, I think it was well done. It just wasn't my personal taste. It's kind of where I felt about it. So that's why I was like, I don't know what to rate this, because I don't think it's a bad movie, but like I would never watch it again, and I didn't really enjoy it, you know? So that's why I didn't rate that. Repo the Genetic Opera, 2008 movie. I watched this movie for the first time when I was about 15, I want to say. And when I watched it at a sleepover, I remember thinking this is the weirdest thing that I've ever seen, and my opinion probably hasn't changed much beyond that. The thing about Repo is it's a horror musical, and it's not good. For many reasons, it is bad. Many, many reasons. However, it has a cult following, and I can understand why it has that cult following. And I would also probably be happy to continue rewatching it in the future. This is the first time I'd ever watched it as an adult, so I've seen it twice now. But I would probably happily rewatch it despite thinking that it's bad. Like, it's very watchable, and it has its kind of moments, and it has its appeal. So while I don't think it's good, I didn't rate it because I still, like, I don't know, there's just something about it. There's just something about it. But, like, honestly, that could get a whole video of its own, because I have so many thoughts, but we're not going to get into them all right now because we have 31 movies to get through. Also, Midsommar 2019, horror movie from last year that got a lot of buzz, and it's, you know, horror movie involving, like, a pagan cult, basically, I guess. And the reason I haven't rated this is because by the time I got to the end of the movie, I couldn't tell you whether I loved it or hated it. I can tell you that I was completely engaged the entire way through the movie, but even now, like, a month later, I can't tell you how I feel. It's one of those ones maybe I'll have to rewatch at some point, but I couldn't rate it. So I was like, do I love this? Do I hate this? I'm slightly uncomfortable. I'm not sure. And then the last thing that I did not rate was Hocus Pocus, which was, funnily enough, actually came out the year I was born in 1993, and yet I had never seen it before, despite it being, you know, exactly the kind of thing that you'd think I would have. Obviously, this is not a horror movie. This is a family-friendly movie about witches. And yeah, I'd never seen it before, so I watched it for the first time this year, and I think because I'd never seen it before and I'd never seen it as a child, I don't have that nostalgic attachment to it that a lot of people do, and so I kind of felt like I felt like, oh, this is okay, but I feel like if I'd watched it as a kid, it's something that I probably would have had the potential to have that love and attachment for, so that's kind of why I didn't rate it. Because it is that, you know, it's a movie that's as old as me, that if I'd watched it early in my life, I don't know whether, like, I would have felt more about it. But yeah, they're the 4 movies I didn't give a rating to. Now we get into my 1 stars. Starting off with Alleluia, The Devil's Carnival, which is another weird horror musical that has, you know, same people involved as Repo. So it's another bad horror musical. This is actually the sequel to The Devil's Carnival, which I also watched in October, we'll get to. The thing is, as much like I think Repo is also not good. However, I don't feel like The Devil's Carnival to me doesn't have the kind of appeal to it that I would still want to rewatch it again. I don't like these movies. I did give The Devil's Carnival 2 stars, the first one, just because I think like a lot went into it, and I can appreciate everything that went into making these movies, but I don't think they're good. Oof, this hurts me. I also gave 1 star to Zombieland Double Tap, which came out in 2019, and it's the sequel to Zombieland, which I love Zombieland. If anyone's seen my video where I went through all the movies I watched last October, it was something I rewatched last October, and I love Zombieland. It's just a lot of fun. And this was so disappointing. It was equally, like, insulting and just bad. Like, there were some things in it that made me kind of uncomfortable, like the treatment of women within the movie, but it was also just not funny and, like, trying too hard, and it just makes me doubly mad because I enjoy the first one so much, and so this shouldn't exist. That's basically where I land on that. Secret Obsession, 2019 Netflix release, which is about a woman who wakes up in the hospital with no memory. I mean, the title alone kind of gave away most of the plot for me, and if you watch the trailer, that completely gives the whole plot away, and there's really no need to watch the movie beyond that. It's not really good or particularly interesting. And definitely one of the worst things I watched in October was Spawn, 1997 movie, which is basically everything bad about the 90s in one movie. It's based on a comic book character. There's some really stupid humor, like, why are there so many jokes about, like, farts? I don't know. It's like it's a very adult movie, but at the same time, it's making the kind of jokes you'd expect in, like, a children's movie, and so I don't really know what it's trying to do there. The special effects are also something, and yeah, just not a good movie. Also reminds me of, like, Power Rangers, just because it has a similar, like, visual look to it. Anyway, yeah. Alright, now I get into my 2 stars. So, Happy Death Day to You, 2019. Another sequel. I didn't have a lot of luck, I didn't have a lot of success with watching sequels this year, because Happy Death Day, the original movie, I watched last year, and I did quite enjoy that. Whereas this, I didn't really like. It's Happy Death Day, there is, you know, they're kind of like horror comedies at the heart of it, and the first one was very much just like a slasher Groundhog Day thing, but this one kind of this one kind of went down a sci-fi and romance route that was weird, and I just thought it was kind of stupid beyond that. Didn't think it was funny, just didn't really enjoy it. Black Christmas 2019 release. I can appreciate what this movie was trying to do. Like, this is a remake, I've never seen the original. It looked a lot at kind of, you know, misogyny and crap like that. And I appreciate what it was trying to do, but ultimately I was just kind of bored watching it, and that's really why it got the 2 stars for me. There was also a few lines of dialogue that I just thought were kind of stupid. But yeah, I know I've seen some people that really enjoyed that movie, so power to you. Little Stranger 2018. This was in the horror category on Netflix. I'm not sure whether it entirely is a horror. I mean, I guess it kind of loosely fits into gothic horror, but even then, like, the horror type stuff doesn't really happen until the later half of the movie. For the most part, it's just like a slow historical drama, it feels like, and I just was kind of bored. House of the Witch 2017, this was kind of your typical haunted house story where a bunch of young people get stuck in a house. So it was one of those ones that was kind of just okay. Nothing new, pretty expected, not the most interesting thing, but could be worse. And then, as I've mentioned, The Devil's Carnival, which was 2012, and the sequel came out in 2016. Again, bad musical. And also, I did find this one, I gave this one 2 stars and the second one 1 star, just because I found this one was slightly more engaging or something. The thing about this movie that also really gave me pause was you're following 3 people who end up in the Devil's Carnival in hell, because, you know, they've died and they've gone to hell. And you've got, like, someone who's there for stealing, you've got someone who's there for abandoning their child, and then the 3rd person is there just for being too trusting of abusive men? That lands you in hell, apparently? I don't know. Anyway, yeah. Then we get to the one movie I rated 2.5, so we're getting into things that I thought were okay. And that was Brightburn, 2019 movie release. Horror movie. If Superman was evil, basically. That's what we're going with here. Evil child that came from space. Evil child that came from space. Yeah, I thought it was okay. That's why it got a 2.5. Alright, then we get into my 3 stars. And the first one I'm going to talk about here, I don't know if I was being generous giving it 3 stars, but it's one of those ones that, again, I really enjoyed the concept of it and what they were trying to do. I just don't feel like it did it successfully. And that was Vampires vs. the BRONX, which is another 2020 release on Netflix. It's a horror comedy. I don't feel like it really lent into the horror or the comedy enough. But it's basically, you're following a bunch of kids and it's vampires, but make it gentrification. That's the kind of concept. So I appreciated the concept, but I didn't think it lent into the horror or the comedy. It wasn't scary, and it also wasn't funny. So it was just kind of like it was watchable, but beyond that, yeah. As I said, like, such a good concept, but I feel like, yeah, with horror comedies, you really have to lean into at least one of them, if not both. Some do both well, and yeah, it was kind of okay. It's something, though, that I do think would be watchable for a younger audience, particularly because, you know, proper horror isn't necessarily going to be something every child can deal with. So for a younger audience, it's probably an okay thing to watch, but yeah. Restoration 2016, this was, I think this was the movie where there was a couple that moved into a new house that they had to fix up, and they found, like, teddy bears all over the house and a diary, and it's a movie that was kind of like a haunted house story, but then it has a bit more to it, and I don't know, I did really enjoy this movie. I just didn't think it was, like, the best thing ever, but I did really enjoy it, and I gave it 3 stars. Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13th Ghost, 2019. Obviously, this is not a horror movie. This is an animated Scooby-Doo movie, and I was watching so much horror in October that one night I just felt like I needed something a little bit lighter and fun. So good old Scooby-Doo. I have not watched Scooby-Doo in a long time, and so this was pretty nostalgic, and it was just a good time in that way, and it feels very much like typical Scooby-Doo. Although some of the puns and stuff got a bit much at times. The thing about this was, I think this movie is also continuing a earlier storyline from a TV show that I've never actually seen the Scooby-Doo show that its storyline links up with. But I did enjoy this. I think the one thing that particularly let it down is the ending kind of undermined some of the storyline of the rest of the movie and some of the messaging of the rest of the movie. So that's what made it feel a bit like, eh. Yeah, I did enjoy it. Scooby-Doo. Ma, 2019 horror movie. I did really enjoy this, but it was also really weird. But basically, it's a good look at why you should not necessarily trust any adult who is trying to befriend you if you are a child. That includes teenagers, because in this case it is a group of teenagers that become friends with a woman, and weird crap happens. We did enjoy it. I watched this. I think about 40% of these movies I watched with my boyfriend, because he's not a big fan of the horror genre. It's like one of his least favorite genres, while it's my favorite. So he was like, I can't do the whole month of horror. But yeah, this is definitely one of the ones that he watched with me, and he also enjoyed it. I can't remember specifically why I gave it 3 stars, but I know that it was weird and I enjoyed it. Then I have both the Addams Family's movies. So The Addams Family 1991 and Addams Family Values 1993. I think I've seen the original Addams Family movie before, but I don't even know if I've watched it the whole way through before. I feel like it's one of those things I might have caught on TV. And Family Values didn't seem familiar to me at all. So I don't know that I've ever watched that before, or if I did, I was so young that I don't remember it. Because again, Family Values came out the year I was born. Yeah, these movies are fun, and they're kind of, you know, classics in their own way, where they're very iconic. And so, like, they're enjoyable, but I don't think they're, like, fantastic movies. They're just family-friendly fun times. They're also really weird. Pet Sematary, the 2019 remake of the Stephen King novel. I've never actually read Pet Sematary, and I've never seen the original movie, so I don't have any basis to compare it to, but I did mostly enjoy this movie. That's why I gave it 3 stars. The thing was, though, there were a lot of kind of questions raised in the movie I felt that weren't answered, and things that weren't really explored. There were a few things like that, but I did mostly enjoy this movie, and again, I have never seen the original or read the book to have the comparison, but I've seen this movie get so much hate, and I don't really understand why. Again, that could be just because I don't have any comparison, having not seen the previous movie or read the book, but I don't know, I thought it wasn't like the best movie, but it was still an enjoyable watch. It was like, you know, 3 stars. Then we get into the movies that I really enjoyed, because it's starting with something I gave 3.5, which was Scream 2, which came out in 1997. I've noticed there's majority of the movies I watched in, I feel like majority of the movies I watched in October were either like 90s movies, a few early 2000s, and then like new releases. There wasn't very much in between, I feel. Wait, I missed one actually. In my 3 stars, I also watched the Amityville Horror 2005, which I think is another remake that I don't know if I've ever seen any of the original movies before, starring Ryan Reynolds, another like haunted house type movie that I did really enjoy. I like typical ghost stories and stuff, which the funny thing about that though is that I could never get into the Conjuring movies. Like, I rewatched one last year and was like, nah. And yet I usually do like them, and they're like the most popular ones in the current day. But anyway, I did really enjoy the Amityville Horror. 3.5, Scream 2. I don't enjoy Scream 2 as much as the first one, which is, I guess, why it's 3.5. It didn't have that same kind of, I wasn't as excited by it or quite as engaged. I don't know. I couldn't even really tell you why. But I do really like the Scream franchise. I do enjoy Scream 2 still. So, you know, 3.5 isn't a bad rating. 4 stars. Now, again, as I said, no particular order really here, it's just how they've landed on the list. But we're getting into the movies that I really enjoy. There are some things here that are rewatches, and I think there are some things that were also new to me, which is kind of just in general what my October was like. So, I have From Dusk Till Dawn, which is a 1996 movie, not the 90s movie. I have a little bit of a mixed feeling for this movie, but this movie is a movie that kind of has two genres, but obviously it's made it on this list, so there is a horror element, but it starts off as like a crime thriller. Is that what genre it would be counted as? I don't know. You're following these brothers who are on the run after they've made a robbery, and I really enjoy this movie. I just think it's really fun, and again, I rate things mostly on enjoyment, and I just have a lot of fun with this movie. It is something that I think I watched as a teenager, and so this is my first rewatch of it. The one thing about this movie is one of the brothers makes me really uncomfortable, and honestly, if all of that was removed from the movie, I'd probably give this 5 stars. Like, not that I think it's necessarily like the best thing out there, but it's just so much fun. I hate that character, and like, I just don't think it was completely necessary, some of it, because, you know, he's especially because it's freaking Quentin Tarantino plays the character, and he's like written this creepy character for himself. It just makes it doubly uncomfortable, but outside of that, the movie's a lot of fun. Anyway, moving on. Knives Out 2019. This is a whodunit movie, and I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was a lot of fun, great cast. You've got definitely a lot of big names in there, and there are definitely some twists in there, and you've got some comedy, and it's just, yeah, a really fun kind of classic whodunit story that also has its own new twist to it, and just had a lot of fun with it. Fun. This is the thing. When I don't like a movie, I am often like, this is why I didn't like it. When I really like a movie, it's usually just like, this movie is just so much fun. So, yeah, as we get to the top of my list, be prepared for that. Interview with the Vampire, another 90s movie, 1994, based on the classic Anne Rice novel. I've never read any of those novels, but this is another movie that's a rewatch for me that I watched originally as a teenager, because I watched a lot of vampire movies as a teenager. Yeah, I do enjoy this movie. I don't know what to tell you at this point. You're following a vampire who's telling a story to a journalist, and so you get to see, you know, how he became a vampire and stuff that went on in his life, and it's kind of a bit sad at points, but, you know, it's a decent movie. The Babysitter 2017, if you were following Spooktober at all, the readathon that I was helping to co-host this year, I watched this. I did a watch along of this in October, so, you know, we all pressed play at the same time and we were talking about it on Twitter, which was a lot of fun, and this was a rewatch for me. I watched it for the first time last October. This is another movie that's just a lot of fun. It's a horror comedy, one of those kind of teen comedy horrors, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. Kid stays awake one night when his babysitter is over, and witnesses some stuff that is maybe not great, and shit goes down. A lot of fun. I don't like the second movie. The second movie came out just before October, so I watched it this year, but yeah, it was like just before October, so it's not in this list, but I didn't like the second one. Again, as I've said, haven't had a lot of success with sequels this year. Annihilation 2018, I believe this is another one based on a book that I've never read. This is another horror movie. I don't know how do you classify this? It's like an adventure, survival, horror, sci-fi. I don't know, it's got kind of a lot of different moving parts, but there's like this bubble that's coming to the world where people who like go into it never come out, and so this team of people go in to try and find out what the hell's going on, and there's weird stuff and creatures and yeah, I don't know. I thought this movie was really well. I thought this movie was really well done, and I enjoyed it. It's a weird one, but yeah, so articulate. The Craft, 1996, another 90s movie. This is actually the movie I watched on the very last day of October, so it was a nice way to close it out. Another rewatch for me. Craft, classic witchy horror movie. So there's maybe some stuff in the movie that hasn't aged real well, but I do really enjoy The Craft, and especially you know, from the perspective of someone who does know a bit about like modern witchcraft, it's also interesting to see how like genuine stuff was incorporated, how genuine stuff was incorporated into this movie. Yeah. Also, like the clothes. We love some witchy 90s fashion. So I don't know what to tell you. I like The Craft. And then the two things on this list that have 4.5 are both technically rewatches, although one of them I didn't really remember that much because I must have watched it so many years ago with my mother. But one is one that was at the top of my list friggin' last year because it's one of those ones that I often rewatch, and that's The Corpse Bride, 2005. The Corpse Bride is my favorite Tim Burton movie, especially out of like the stop motion. As much as I know like The Nightmare Before Christmas is the one that tends to get all the love, but I prefer The Corpse Bride. I don't know whether I would necessarily, I don't know whether watching it this year I would necessarily give it a 4.5, like that's the original rating that I just didn't change. Look, I do enjoy that movie. It's also a bit nostalgic for me at this point. Yeah, it's the aesthetics, the music, good time. And then the other thing at the top of my list is Scream, 1996, the original Scream. Again, this was a rewatch for me. I've watched the Scream movies before, I think with my mum, or who knows how old I was when I watched them. It was many years ago now, but because it was so long ago, I didn't really have much memory of the Scream movies, to the extent like I couldn't even remember who the killers were and all of that kind of stuff. So it was still like a complete rediscovery for me, so that was just like doubled the fun. And I think now that I'd say Scream is actually one of my favorite horror movies. Like, I just had so much fun with it, and I love how Scream is one of those movies that's equally like a horror movie, but also kind of pokes at so many of the tropes of horror movies. Like, what was I saying? I don't know. I really enjoyed watching Scream, especially because although I'd watched it before, it was still like a rediscovery of the movie for me. Scream's a lot of fun. It's also, I also feel like it's just a clever movie, the way it's done and the way it examines horror tropes. I mean, I am also that person who likes to overanalyze media sometimes, so yeah, great fun. Also, we're playing, the funny thing is that we were playing friggin' Jackbox games on the weekend at my friend's house, and one of the ones is like you pick categories for people, and so the category we had was 90s movies, and so Scream was one of the options, and it was the one that people put me as, and I was like, I'll take that. I'll take that. I think it's one of my favorite movies now. I think we're good. Obviously, I didn't go into much detail on any of these movies because 31's a lot of movies to get through, and we don't want to be here all day. There are a few of my general thoughts, the movies I enjoy, the movies that I didn't enjoy. What are some of your favorite horror movies? Do you do anything special for the spooky season? Or is that just me? I've done it 2 years in a row now. Next year, do we go for a third year of 31 spooky movies? Maybe, but I might need to look around for what movies I might be watching. Yeah, the only things that I watched last October that I watched again this year were The Babysitter and The Corpse Bride. I think most of the movies I watched were completely new to me. The only things that were rewatches were Corpse Bride, Scream, The Craft, The Babysitter, Interview with the Vampire, From Dusk Till Dawn, Scream 2. And I think that's it. and I guess Addams Family, but I don't remember the Addams Family at all, so I don't know whether I've ever actually watched it all the way through. But either way, I did watch some really good things. I also watched some really bad things, and I also watched some things that I have undecided mixed feelings about. Regardless, have you watched any of these movies? What do you think of them? Do you agree or disagree with any of my ratings? And why? What are your favorite horror movies? Yeah, let's just talk spooky movies in the comments, because I love spooky stuff. I just love spooky stuff, okay? I just love spooky stuff. Also, this is my pig. I don't even know where he came from. I'm pretty sure he's been around since I was a kid. Pig. Pigs are one of my favorite animals. There's a fun fact for you. Not relevant to anything, but I'm just like zoning out. Alright. We're good. We're done. Stay safe. Starzy out.